Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us today. Well, as prices continue to rise faster than household incomes, many people are facing a tough winter ahead. And these people could be your employees, they could be your colleagues, they could even be you. So financial worries are one of the main causes of stress. So what individuals are going through has a direct impact on how they are at work. In this discussion, we will explore what you can do to support staff and colleagues and hopefully dispel some of the social stigma around seeking financial help. Well, I'm joined by three expert guests, Samuel Lathy, who himself went through significant financial difficulties and as a result educated himself about the issue and founded the app Bippit, which offers one-to-one financial coaching. Samuel, thanks very much for joining us. Michael Clark is Head of Information Programs for the charity Turn to Us, which helps people in financial need to gain access to benefits, grants, and other financial help. And Matthew Cole is CEO of the Fuel Bank Foundation, the charity that offers help and support to people who are in fuel crisis. As always, if you have any questions, please do pop them into the chat and we'll try to get to them either during or at the end of our conversation. Perhaps, first of all, I could just start, Matthew, asking you about the sorts of problems that you're seeing from people who you are encountering on the ground with the Fuel Bank Foundation at the moment.
Yeah, of course. Hi, Jane, and hi, everybody, and good to be with you. So Fuel Bank is like Food Bank, except rather than providing crisis beans and macaroni for people who are struggling, we provide crisis electricity and gas. And today, we're helping about 3,000 people a day who don't have the money they need. I think that's the point, Jane. You know, people today who we are seeing have just run out of cash for everyday essentials. Now, I'm not saying that we're representative or our clients are representative of everybody in the UK, but of the demographic of the people we're supporting, there's a real issue of kind of day-to-day finances just not being in place, and therefore the cash people need on a day-to-day basis for really basic things: heating yourself, paying rent, paying for emergency transport, essential transport, and paying for energy. That's become really, really tough. And I think I just end it by saying the real challenge is it's warm outside at the moment, it's not winter. And so I think there's a kind of pending crisis happening, really, that shortly people will be in a really dire situation when they literally don't have the money to keep themselves properly anymore. And that's the challenge I'm sure that Sam and Michael will probably be seeing in their organisations too.
Yeah, Michael, I was going to come to you then, Turn to Us. Is it a similar scene for you? And are you seeing, as Matthew alluded to, people who are in work, you know, yes, struggling in poverty at the moment?
We're seeing a lot of people who are in work. As we know, a huge amount of people, for example, are on challenging contracts, shall we say, 0-hour contracts or in low pay, and have been depending on that extra that Universal Credit provides for quite a long time. It isn't providing enough now for them to actually live on, and neither are the jobs they're actually doing. So we're seeing so many more people who are very much dependent on benefits and are hitting the limits of those benefits on top of the actual hard work they already do.
And how is that affecting them? What are they telling you about how they're actually feeling, you know, going through that struggle at the moment?
I think I don't like to categorize people because everyone has, you know, different and a lot of different challenges. But you could really broadly say that, firstly, there are people who have been struggling for a long time because austerity has been here for a long time. Prices have been rising for a long time. It's become especially pointy with post-pandemic, post the Ukraine, most recently, most visible. And they have been struggling with debt and struggling to make ends meet and making choices about whether they're going to eat, how they're going to afford school uniform and things like that for quite a long time. But then there's an increasingly large number of people who, tipped over the edge perhaps by the fuel crisis in particular, are having to look for benefits, to look for extra work to actually make ends meet for the first time. And so they are struggling with a whole new range of different systems and bureaucracies that they have not had to deal with before. So we're seeing those people calling us, and I think they're more digitally enabled. So they're using the live chat in our systems. So we're seeing a spike there as well. So I think there's those two broad strands happening.
So Samuel, when it comes to financial difficulties, you have your own experience of that, haven't you, from a few years ago? So does that take you back to understand where these people are? And obviously it's, everybody's got a different experience, but your experience, does that take you back to that awful stress that it creates and the difficulties it creates for you around relationships with others, your own well-being?
Yeah, look, I mean, I've got an awful lot of empathy for people who are struggling right now. I've been through my own sort of, journey, I suppose. I struggled with my finances when I was in my early 20s, and it led to some really extreme experiences for me. And, it was a very dark period of my life, to be frank. And there are an awful lot of people who are struggling right now, struggling to manage their budgets. And as the other panelists have alluded to, we have got the winter coming up now. Winter is coming, I guess. And things are going to get really, really difficult. And people are going to have to make really difficult decisions about whether they keep their homes warm or whether they feed their family. It's going to get that extreme. But, one of the things we do at Bippit is, we go into organizations and we help everyone. So we see the whole spectrum, really. We provide everyone with one-to-one coaching and support. So there are people who are, really struggling with their budget. They're struggling to make ends meet. They're struggling to, keep stability in their lives, I guess. But then you've also got an awful lot of people who are just about managing right now and are feeling really stressed and really anxious about what the future holds. And then you've even got people who are doing just about okay, but they're needing to recalibrate their hopes and dreams for the future with all of this stuff that's going on with inflation. So, it's kind of goes from one extreme to the other. And I think all of us at the moment are being affected by it.
And so the onus is on employers almost now, isn't it? As well as the individual, to be able to help the people that work for them in some shape or form. Are you seeing that a lot in the conversations that you're having in the workplace, Samuel?
Yeah. I think, there's kind of a shared responsibility, within our society. We have responsibility as individuals, to try and make the right decisions and try to, organize things as best we can. Then there is a responsibility on behalf of the government to be doing more. And we are seeing more support coming through right now with the energy price guarantee. But look, things have already journeyed an awfully long way. So even though we are getting more support, there is a hell of a lot more that could be done and maybe should be done. But, we are seeing some support come through. But then there's also a responsibility that we feel as employers. And as an employer ourselves at Bippit, we have a responsibility for our staff to make sure that they're being looked after and make sure they have the support that they want. And I think one of the big challenges we have in society, really, when it comes to our financial well-being and our personal finances, is that there's a lot of stigma around it. There's a lot of stigma around reaching out for support. It's very hard to talk to colleagues or friends or even family members about this stuff. So the more services that we can provide, like Turn to Us and like Bippit, where we can provide people support as and when they need it, the better, really, because it remains a very private part of our lives that we often keep hidden away from the world.
Michael, do you find that with the people that are using your digital communication channels that it's almost like the first time that they've admitted that they've got a problem?
I think it's an interesting thing, actually. What we find is that in general, people do not like to admit that they have a problem. That's just people. Yeah. And I've worked in the health sector in terms of charities as well. And it's a similar thing. People do not like to admit they have a problem. What we do find is that the majority of people who call us are women. The people we really wish would be more open about admitting they have a problem are, of course, men, which is a bit of a challenge. I think there's a definite, we see this across all of our actual channels. It is more likely to be women in terms of, and that also reflects, I think, the role that the heavier burden in any time of austerity or financial crisis like this, that women or single parent households actually face.
Yeah.
So we do see that people struggle to actually reach out for help. Women are more likely to reach out for help. Men are less likely. And of course, the people who are more likely to reach out for help are people who have dependents, people who have caring responsibilities, people who are looking after children, single parent families, especially.
And that's presumably a large chunk of a workforce as well, isn't it?
Yes. I think I was looking at the stats recently, something around half, don't ask me for the exact number, of people who use a benefit calculator, possibly more than that, are people who are in work. And we've seen that proportion steadily increase as time has gone on.
Matthew, I saw you nodding there when Samuel was talking. The onus on employers and the role that the employer now needs to have around financial support is getting to be pretty crucial, isn't it? I know we're in this situation where there are, people going on strike because they want to get a better wage. But for your average employer, what is the role at the moment, do you think?
I think it's really interesting. And I think the point Michael touched on, that in the olden days, whenever the olden days was, there was an assumption that people working would be okay, and people who were in the benefit system were probably not working. And we're seeing exactly the same pitch that Michael and Samuel alluded to, that there are people who are clearly in work, clearly working very hard, and the welfare system is topping up what people earn. What I see in the fuel bank network, which I think is really key for employers actually, there are lots of people kind of stepping into poverty who have never stepped there before. And so this is completely new. In fact, I was talking to a lady in Scunthorpe last week, and she said it was like many years ago, she went to Turkey on holiday. And when she got to the airport, she went outside, it was really hot and there was nobody there to meet her. And she said, I was in a foreign country, didn't speak the language, didn't know where to go to, didn't know who to trust. And she said, actually, roll forward 15 years, that's what I feel now in crisis. Obviously, I'm not in Turkey, I'm not really hot, but I've got a clue where to go to. This is completely new, uncharted territory. And that's what's really hard for people. They don't know who to trust. Now, an employer, is often the key organisation you can have those initial conversations with. And I think it's so key because it allows employers to kind of recognise the challenges that people are facing, and therefore demonstrating that the only solution isn't necessarily a wage increase, because sometimes the issues are much, much, much larger. There might be a discussion about wages, but also there are other support things which can be introduced. I hear a lot of the support organisations saying, in fact, Martin Lewis alluded to it a few weeks ago, he's now out of ideas, he cannot solve every problem. And that's why it's really important early doors for employers to be kind of say, how is it I can support you? What do I need to be aware of in your situation? How is it I can make life easier for you? How is it that how is it that I can allow you access to other things? So it's simple things. People have come to Fuel Bank and reported that they've got an appointment with a debt charity who's going to kind of renegotiate debts for them on their behalf, but they're really struggling to talk to their employer about taking an hour and a half off work because they don't want to admit what their problem was to their employer. And I think it's about creating that space where people are given the time, and also employers trust people to. Employees trust their employer that actually if they go to them honestly with something, it's not going to end up being a negative consequence for them. If that makes sense.
So Samuel, is that about creating what you'd call a sort of inclusive, safe environment where the employer makes it clear that if employees are struggling, they can come and have a chat with a specific member of staff?
Yeah, I think it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge to create that sort of culture where people can easily come forward to talk about this stuff. One of the best things that we were able to do as an organization was to kind of, have a separation almost between the employer and the support service. So what we provide is a sort of confidential, private space for people to talk about things. So apart from some, are people using the platform kind of metrics that we share with employers, there's no oversight there. We're able to surface key concerns within an organization, but I think it's crucially important that people feel comfortable and feel that there is, someone to talk to there. Often it's much easier to talk to a stranger about these things, as long as they are qualified and they're professional, rather than talking to a friend or a family member. we touched upon it earlier. I had my own struggles earlier in my life. I had a really, difficult situation where I was trying to drag myself out of debt, and I was too embarrassed to tell my friends about it. I was still kind of keeping up appearances, really. And I didn't want to worry my family members. And the more we can highlight for people that there are services out there now where they can get support, and it is confidential, it is private, it is secure, the more we can bring people to deal with these concerns, because pretty much everyone across the country is concerned to one degree or another about their finances right now. And the more support we can get into people, the better. It's just one of the best opportunities that we have to do that is through the employer. There's this thing called the Edelman Trust Barometer, which gets reported every year. And employers are the most trusted channel, more trusted than the government, more trusted than media. And there is a huge opportunity for us as employers to, provide additional support to people. And if we can do that, hopefully we can help them deal with the challenges ahead.
Michael, what sort of support would you like to see employers providing if they can?
I would love to see employers supporting the calls for stronger workers' rights, because if you're on a 0-hour contract and you have to take 1.5 hours out to go and get debt counselling, then the majority of employers who employ people in those conditions will not pay you for that time. So it would be really, really great if those employers would have the compassion to pay people for that time. It's a two-way thing. Yes, we really need people to be more open with employers about the struggles they're having and what employers can do to help. And employers have actually got to respond to that in a compassionate, constructive way, to give people the paid time to do those things, because they will get a return on it. It makes economic sense. There are so many studies that do that. I could go on, but I think the kind of help that people need is going to cost somebody money. That's what it comes down to. And I think people have to do their part in terms of being willing to look at themselves and make the tough choices. But employers also have to do their part, and that is going to cost them cash. There's no way around that.
Yeah. And there are some employers, I think, thinking about sort of like a cost of living bonus at the moment, which I think could be beneficial, couldn't it, Michael? But potentially sometimes might affect somebody's benefits. So there's a balance to be made, isn't there, as to whether it's a good thing or a bad thing?
I think I had a conversation with an employer who had the absolute best of intentions and was going about it entirely the right way and just wanted to find the best way to support his workers in this context. And someone who looked after part-time workers very well, but yes, a lot of them also depended on benefits, and giving them a taxable amount of money. It would affect their benefits potentially and make life complicated. There are ways around it, but it has to be approached very carefully. The support needs to be there so that the employee understands the impact that it would have on their benefits. We have a useful tool on our benefit calculator where somebody can do a benefit calculation, and then at the end of the calculation, they can ask the question, what have I got this amount of extra money? And what have I got this amount of extra hours? What impact would that have on their benefits? We would always say, though, talk to an advisor. Anything which is going to make your life more complicated. And employees can perhaps help if they want to do something like that by perhaps bringing an advisor in to support their employees in negotiating that kind of bonus and the impact it might actually have. Why won't they do that? Because the queues to try and get hold of advisors through services like CAB or trying to get on the DWP helpline, people sit on there for 2-3 hours at a time.
Yeah. Samuel, is that the sort of help that you're providing at the moment in terms of, obviously, I know you do the sort of one-to-one coaching, but is there a strategic piece that you're doing with employers as well?
Well, I think, one of the big strategic things that we work with employers around is the return on investment of providing support. So to Matthew's point, someone has to kind of pick up the tab if additional support is going to be provided. But the research is now really, really clear. If you can deal with financial stress, if you can support people with their financial life as an employer, then you're dealing with an awful lot of costs to the business. So when employees are stressed about their finances, they're more than twice as likely to leave. And any employer will know how expensive it is to hire new people and train them up. It can be, 1/3 salary just to replace someone because of that break in utility of the employee. And then when people are financially stressed, they're 4 times more likely to be clinically depressed, which can have these huge knock-on effects when it comes to absenteeism and presenteeism. So you have to kind of dig under the surface a little bit for the business case, but it is incredibly solid if you do. And if we can show that to more employers, then it will highlight that actually this isn't going to be a cost to the business. Actually, in the long run, it's going to save you money if you can provide support. And I think it is important to get advisors, get professionals, get experts in to help people, whether they're struggling with debt, whether they need to, engage more with benefits and understand the implications of that, or whether they're actually doing okay, but they could be doing an awful lot better. If we can do that for people, we're going to help them feel, more secure, more prosperous, and ultimately more settled in their job, which is going to be a great thing for businesses in general.
Matthew, what advice would you have for employers following on from that?
Yeah, no, I'm nodding wholeheartedly, and I think what's really sad is when people are really stressed and anxious, they often make really rational choices because it feels like a really sensible thing to do. So I was talking to a few bank clients who'd moved occupation and moved job for 13 pence an hour increase in salary. And what they hadn't realised was that they were working one less contractual hour a week. So net, it didn't really make any difference, but they lost kind of all the accrued benefits they'd had. And when you talk to the client about what they needed, it was kind of actually just needed somebody who listened and understood, but they also wanted to see that their previous employer kind of recognised that they needed additional help. And so I think, as Sam really clearly lays out, is that making sure there's a culture where you can talk, there's no fear of consequences for having that conversation. And also it's just so which is there, you can access yourself. It's not something you have to kind of seek out and apply for and you might get selected in 3 years' time. It's if you need help today because you picked up your hand today and say you need it, you'll get it. It's really important that it's kind of there in the background almost for people to access when they need it. And then if they need more intensive things, it's also there as well. And I think to your point, Sam, I spent my life in corporate world. Recruitment is really, really hard. And you know what, you can spend so much time not doing your day job because you're having to recruit people. And so you're right, you can cost half an annual salary just to recruit somebody, but it's all the other time you lose as well, the management time, not managing your business, just managing recruitment. So I think this is a no-brainer in some ways, in the same way that 150 years ago people didn't have holidays, or 50 years ago people didn't have pensions. This is just a no-brainer. Employers need to provide it because a workforce which is happy and feeling more supported is more productive and will achieve better outcomes for the business.
And in terms of the creation of an environment where employees can come forward, Matthew, and feel comfortable, what can kind of team leaders, HR managers do? Are there some practical things that they could be doing at the moment, specifically because we know that this is going to be a difficult, 6 months to a year minimum, potentially?
Yeah, I think 6 months to a year, or maybe 3 or 4 years, depending on which papers you read. Michael talked a few moments ago about people feeling really embarrassed about saying that they're in a problem and situation. I think for team leaders who are often kind of the face of the organisation, the face of HR, if you like, for people who work in teams, it's really important that they think about if they're in that situation, would they, to say in a team meeting, put up your hand if you're struggling financially. People might not want to put up their hand, but when people have one-to-ones or private sessions, broaching the subject, talking about the challenges which we're aware of in the workplace, but also economically in the country, having that private time, doing it in a private space, not in a canteen where everybody else can hear, almost drop feeding into the conversation that support is available if you need it. So it allows people to go home and think about it, talk to family members and friends about, is this something I should take up? It's really, really important. And also there's that old marketing thing, isn't there, that you've got to promote something at least 5 times. You've got to see 5 messages before something resonates in people's brains. Don't just think, well, I mentioned it once, so therefore people will come. Keep making sure that it's available on an online notice board, or in a poster on the back of the toilet door, or it's mentioned in a one-to-one, or it's in a team brief that support is available. And so when the time's right, people will start to, say, I need that, I want to access that. Did you agree, Michael, or for what you've seen?
Someone had to do the mute button thing, and it was me. Yeah. No, I would agree. I think the crucial thing is to also make sure you've got that support handy to have them. Have those conversations and make sure you've got something to offer. Whether it's information, whether it's the kind of like employee support schemes like Bippit or others, make sure that you have something there. I think there is a range of help available. We keep a database of individual charitable grants that anybody can apply for from all over the country. The eligibility criteria vary, but it also contains the kind of support that fuel companies offer. And I think Matthew will be far more familiar with that than me, but pretty much all energy companies, utility companies, to a greater or lesser extent, they have schemes they're statutorily obliged to, which will support people, especially people who are disabled, who are struggling with those kinds of utility or fuel bills. There are grants in terms of if somebody needs a transport desperately, there might be a solution for that. The challenge is that there are so many of them. They are scattered all over the country. They have different eligibility criteria. We have a database of all of them. The benefits thing, I'm going to bang on about this one more time. It's always important for people to check if there's a benefit that they're entitled to. Traditionally, you'd think it would be very low paid or part-time workers, but that boundary is creeping up, especially as things get tighter. It's always worth checking to see if you're entitled to something. And if you are entitled to something, the really important thing is to apply for it immediately, because there is a 5-week gap for universal credit from applying to it to getting to it. So just as Matthew, I think, was saying, that it takes 5 times to get the message through, and that people will wait and delay and prevaricate because people are human and these are difficult, complicated things to do. Really encourage your workforce, if there's something they're entitled to check if they are, use our benefit calculator, one of those ones, and then actually go and do it. Give them the time to do this, because again, it's going to give you a return on investment.
And that communication piece, Samuel, is critical in all of this, isn't it? We have to be reminding people where the help is, where they can go for support internally and externally at the moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's a huge challenge, especially if you're in a large organization. Like, communications are really, really hard at scale, and it's something that we as an organization try to help with as much as possible and do as much of the heavy lifting as we can. But ultimately, there's an element of culture that needs to lend a hand with that stuff. And I think Matthew was making a point about that it's almost like, culture comes from the top, and if we can get people in leadership positions talking about this stuff and saying, hey, I'm going to use this support, it normalizes it for everyone. And I think it's really, really helpful to shine a light on this and get people talking. But yeah, there's heavy lifting to be done with the communications piece. And it kind of feels like there are lots of different approaches to it. And if you can have a blend of things, it's not just putting something on a notice board. It's not just having a launch event. It's not just having a sort of well-being day. It's lots and lots of different things. It's not just, training up the mental health first aiders to be able to provide a bit of financial health and support and signposting as well. It's lots and lots of different things. But if we can get the ingredients right for that, then we can be providing some really helpful support.
And I guess the other challenge here is that not everybody is in the office now. So how do you do that with a workforce that might be sitting like us at home, working?
Yeah, I mean, I think any solution, and Michael was touching upon it about how popular the chat function is now. It needs to be technology enabled. It needs to reach people where they are. Now, whether you use a web-based service, a website, or an app, making sure that it can reach people where they are, then that's what we've really got to achieve. And I think, from my perspective, there also needs to be something for everyone. There's no one size fits all with dealing with financial stress and improving our financial well-being. You know, what works for one person is not going to work for another. We're all unique. We each have our own unique financial situation and needs. And I mean, if we can create lots of different entry points for people to engage with their financial life, then hopefully we're making a step in the right direction.
I think it's about having those examples as well, Jane, of people who've, been through the process, people who are really happy to advocate and can go, this was my situation and this is what my company, my boss, my employer did for me. This is the support they provided. This is where I've got to. Now, I know it can be challenging to find people who want to do that, but there will be people in the organisation who probably have been supported and are happy to talk about that. And I remember many years ago, things like smoking cessation campaigns. Why were they really often successful in the workplace? It's because a couple of people went through it almost as a guinea pig and kind of then stood on their platform and said, actually, this was really great. It worked for me. And I think, Samuel rightly said, you've just got to make sure that there are multiple entry points, but also multiple prompts, if you like, for people. That support does exist, but absolutely having past successes from that organisation where people can resonate with Jim, who sits down in the office, or Tricia, who sits in that team over there. That's what kind of wins hearts and minds, I think. And
also, I was just thinking there, Matthew, there are so many people sharing their sort of shock horror stories of receiving their, new energy tariffs at the moment, that in a way, social media is kind of helping bring some of these issues to the fore, just because people are saying, I cannot actually believe that I'm about to be charged this amount of money. So maybe even people starting by sharing those kinds of stories then possibly might open up a conversation that otherwise would be quite difficult to have in the workplace.
Yeah, I think you're right. But I do worry about some of the messaging on social media, that it kind of causes a panic unnecessarily sometimes. And also sometimes the stories, I mean, social media is great, isn't it? It's a great leveler, but also so sometimes the advice given on social media isn't always correct, or the information shared isn't always correct. I think that's why employers providing that kind of really easy to access impartial service where people can talk to somebody or access help from somebody or something is so important, that it means that people don't almost have to enter the Wild West, which can be social media. They can get help from their employers. So I go back to the earlier point, people trust their employers. People normally are very, very committed to the organisation they work for. So if they can help them with something else in their lives, that's a good thing.
Yeah. So it's really about creating a support environment that doesn't make people feel shame or embarrassment, I guess, to come forward and say that they're struggling.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's so important.
Yeah. Michael, can you tell us a little bit more about Turn to Us and the benefits calculator that you've been mentioning? How does that work and how that...
I do mention it a lot, don't I?
It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
I think one of the challenges that people face is the benefit system is, let's face it, complicated and not the friendliest thing in the world, and it's entirely digital. It is a little bit of an intimidating monolith. So the current version of our calculator, it basically asks you all the questions that you will be asked if you do an official benefits application, in terms of collecting a lot of information, but in a friendlier, slightly better structured way. The other thing is it's anonymous. It does not store your personal data. So you can experiment, you can go in and try it out, you can see what you might get without worrying that you're starting any kind of an official process up. Yep. So it's on our website. We put a link to it smack on the front page. About 2.8 million people in the last year have done completed benefit calculations. It takes about 10 minutes, and it will give you a personally relevant to all the information you have provided it with. It's pretty much to the nearest penny calculation of what you would be entitled to. The limitation is, of course, that you have to put the correct information in. We can't, allow for that. And there is live chat support on it if you run into something which you're not quite sure about. And as I said earlier, you can also, if you're already getting benefits, work through the calculation, check you're getting the right amount, and also check if there will be a difference if you do have the chance to work any more hours or anything like that. So it's a really invaluable tool. It's
a good place to start, really, isn't it?
A really good starting point. I would say that anybody who is having financial troubles, there's a list of things which I think the three of us would say people have to do. Top of the list for me is do a benefit calculation, check you're getting everything you're entitled to. You've paid your title, you paid your taxes, or you will pay taxes. You should not feel embarrassed about it. If you're struggling, you shouldn't feel embarrassed. You should just go and check that you're entitled to it. People have a right to live a life with some money and some dignity, no matter what their situation, and welfare benefits can help you with that.
And in terms of energy, the energy situation then, Matthew, when would somebody come to the Fuel Bank Foundation, and what should they do if they are worried?
So our model is that we operate through a network of about 400 or so, 450 partners across the country. So they're typically places where people would go to when they're in crisis. So kind of at the very end, really, if you like, of the fuel poverty line, they don't have the money they need today to keep themselves warm today. And so we see people who are referred into us from food banks, from citizens' advice, from local housing officers, from lots of good charities up and down the country. My advice would be, almost if you're coming to us, in some ways it's almost too late, although we'll always be there to help, that actually having those preemptive conversations with organisations, with advice companies, with companies with advice organisations early doors is really important. And if you feel that a crisis is pending, it's much better to seek that advice beforehand. Talking to your energy company is a great thing to do if you're worried about future energy costs. They can check that you're accessing the grants which are available. They can also check whether any debt you're repaying back is fair and reasonable as per the energy company license position. It's what we're trying to do is to stop people needing us in the first place, rather than, we provide great service for people who do, but we want to try and stop the stream before it becomes a torrent, if that makes sense. And so the most important thing, if you're struggling, or you're going to struggle, speak to your energy company, but also speak to your housing provider as well. If you live in social housing in particular, there's probably additional support which is available there from your landlord or local authority.
And Samuel, this is all really about preventing things happening, isn't it? Preventing things getting too bad. So that role of the employer, again, that we sort of started off talking about, is really critical. Is there anything that an employer can do to sort of spot early signs of somebody who might be struggling? Are there any indicators?
Well, it's really, really difficult. And especially now where the majority of organizations have, remote working and some kind of hybrid situation. So that there's even more distance and more challenges to uncover these problems. But even when we were all, pre-COVID in the workplace, everyone sort of in front of each other all the time, it's a very hidden part of our lives. You can think of it as the elephant in the room, really. It's everywhere, but it's nowhere at once. And so there's a huge challenge. I think, what employers can do, is provide support, try to normalize the conversation. And as we touched upon earlier, have that culture come down from the top, if at all possible, so that people can feel comfortable or at least have more comfort in talking about these things. And then we can start, picking up those rocks and seeing what's happening underneath.
So we're almost out of time, and if anybody has got a question, please do put them in the chat. But I think we've covered an awful lot here. I guess what I'd like to do is just end, really. I know you've all shared some good advice over the last sort of 40 minutes, but what would be your kind of top couple of tips, really, for anybody who is worried and starting to think that they might financially struggle over the next few months? Matthew, maybe I could start with you.
So I think if you're worried or think you're going to be worried, speak to your energy company, seek out advice earlier. Excuse me. But then I'd also say, speak to your employer. If you work in a support role in an organisation and can make change happen, make it. But also flag to your employer that actually I need support, and see where that conversation gets to as well. Suggest it to HR or other people in those kind of support roles. And I'm sure there'll be lots of people asking for similar things, and something might happen as a result of that.
Michael?
As Matthew says, talk to your energy company earlier. If you have a problem, talk to anybody you actually think you might be owing money to earlier than later. Do a benefit calculation, see what you're going to be entitled to, see if there are grants available that might help you with specific kind of needs. And employers, these things take time. So yes, employees talk to employers. Employers, be compassionate to employees. Give them the time to do this, and don't take it out of their pay, because that won't help matters.
Thank you, Michael. And Samuel.
I mean, I'll echo what Matthew and Michael have just said. Yes, you know, if you're struggling with your energy bills, talk to your energy company. If you're struggling with debt, speak to your creditors, try to set up a plan, or speak to a debt counsellor. Make sure you're taking advantage of any free money that's on the table. So go to Turn to Us, use the benefits calculator. But then also, you know, think about your entire financial life, because this cost of living storm we have right now is going to be around for a number of years, and we've got to kind of batten down the hatches. So there's immediate stuff that we can do, but we all have a responsibility as individuals as well to be making potentially more difficult decisions when it comes to our budget. So sort out your budget, create one, get organized with this stuff. And if we can do that now, before things get even worse, then we can start creating a bit more financial security, hopefully, to weather that storm that's going to be around for the next few years.
Well, thank you, all three of you, for the excellent advice that you've passed on today. I really appreciate your time. There's much more information and support and video content on financial wellbeing and the cost of living crisis on our own Ashia Wellbeing platform if you are already a client. And we signpost the likes of the Fuel Bank Foundation and Turn to Us and Step Change and the Money and Pension Advice Centre on there as well. If you'd like to know more about how we provide preventative first-line support for employee wellbeing, then do please get in touch. You can follow us on our social media. Thank you again, Matthew, Michael and Samuel, for your time today. And thank you everybody who's joined the conversation and listened in to us today. We'll be putting the recording on our YouTube channel, and we'll share that with you a little bit later on as well. And there's a free offer of a wellbeing session with Bippit. If you'd like to take that up, do take the opportunity and register your interest. We'll put that all in the email to follow up. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.